royal family saw Harry and Meghan just chomping at the bit, ready to use that royal name to pad their pockets. They knew exactly what they were dealing with. They'd already done this with Sarah Ferguson. All these side deals where she personally is benefiting, and then having the audacity to be like, it's going to charity, it's going to charity. What charity? Your mom's polo ponies? What charity? It's going to charity. 10%. I mean, what? And exactly to what charity did the 10% make it to? You know what I'm saying? Was that part of her shoe money? You know, was that part of her purse money? What 10% charity? You know? Because we know how she defines charity, and it ain't the way you and I define charity. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise. We are going to keep going in the book entitled, the book about Prince Andrew and his ex-wife Sarah Ferguson. Now, you'll remember that last time I left you on a bit of a cliffhanger, telling you that today's section, one of the sections today, was entitled A Nymphette Called Babs, and that's what we're going to pick up. But I would just like to say that I know I've ragged on him about his looks and said, that guy, he's less appealing than a dying sloth. I've just had all kinds of words to say about the man. So I went back and I looked. I mean, everyone can't be wrong. I do take back some of the things I said. He's obviously not repugnant, but his personality is just so awful that I just don't feel like this level of good looks was able to overcome his personality. Again, definitely better looking when he was younger, for sure. The man has aged like milk. But I would say that I can understand why people gave him a second look, and if he was charming and had the ability to charm people, that'd be one thing, but we know that he did not. There's just so many reports of people being offended by his personality, feeling like his entitlement and his superiority and the constant need to remind you who he was. Like, I just don't feel like these looks right here are able to do the heavy lifting required for me to not notice that you're an annoying spoiled brat. Do you know what I'm saying? So definitely better looking than I remember that he was, but not good looking enough for me not to notice that you're a jackass. So that's where I stand on that. Anyway, let's keep going, okay? A nymphette called Babs. Now, I just want to say before we get started, this situation is going to be because Sarah's dad is out of control. But when you read how he behaved, and when you consider what we're about to read today, it is no wonder that the girl is classless and without any dignity whatsoever, because the stock she came from seems to lack a considerable amount of self-respect. Let's continue. Ronald Ferguson had long caused the royal family embarrassment. Since the engagement, the Major had been organizing dinners at a restaurant in Pont Street, as well as polo events and cocktail parties, charging between £1,000 and £5,000 a head, which his daughter and son-in-law then graced. Making money on the royal name is something that Ronald will do, but that his daughter will do even better. At the beginning of May, he appeared as an elderly punk with a red and pink Mohican and leather jacket draped in chains, and at a charity performance of Barry Humphrey's show Back with a Vengeance, where he was presented with a pair of white Y-fronts. A week later, the People newspaper revealed over 5 pages that the Major was a regular of the Wigmore Club, a West End massage parlor where he paid for sexual services from a number of women, giving them perfume and bath oil said to be used by the royal family. He claimed he only went there for straight massages, and was said to be more upset by the suggestion that he had worn a blazer at Claridge's than by the accusation of adultery with a nymphette called Babs. A few months later, Ron lost his job as vice chairman of the Guards Polo Club, his seat on the committee of the Hurlingham Polo Association, the game's governing body, and Prince Charles dropped him as his personal polo manager after 21 years. It was said that people had been tipped off about a senior politician using the club, and Ferguson was only caught by chance. His daughter appeared unconcerned, and is supposed to have told him, "Hold your head up and be even more arrogant than you normally are." In truth, Sarah was finding the growing pressures difficult to cope with herself, and was constantly in tears. Her husband had signed on for a further 10 years in the Navy, and in May had joined the destroyer HMS Edinburgh as an officer of the watch in order to earn his watchkeeping and ocean navigation certificates. The Queen, sympathetic to her daughter-in-law's unhappiness, arranged for Andrew to take compassionate leave, and he returned from his tour of the Far East and Australia, but spent rather more of it at Balmoral than the couple's new home. 6 months pregnant, Sarah now weighed over 200 pounds, having drowned my sorrows in mayonnaise, sausage rolls, and smoked mackerel pate sandwiches from Marks and Spencer's. Wendy Barry, the Highgrove housekeeper, had noticed a difference. The rather frumpy Sloane she had first met among the bedsheets had turned into a very demanding young madam. Barry looked at Sarah's brand-new expensive luggage and couldn't help contrasting it with the battered old suitcases she had trailed her belongings in before the marriage. She was obviously loving every moment of her newfound importance as a duchess. Taking tea to Sarah one morning, Barry asked if she needed anything pressing, and the duchess pointed at 2 bags filled with blouses and maternity clothes. "All of it, ma'am?" I responded. "Yes," she said firmly. "All of it." Now, just as a side note, I wonder sometimes if Sarah, thinking that these people who were all about her were hired for just such a task as, ironing her clothes, didn't think that she was asking something too much. When somebody said, "You need anything pressed?" and she said, "Yes, I want all of these clothes pressed." I wonder if she didn't think that she was within her rights to ask that. And so I think it is a little bit hard with her because, on the one hand, if somebody comes and says, "Do you need anything ironed?" and you legitimately want all of these clothes ironed, are you not supposed to ask for it? Or are you supposed to just give the outfit of the day that you want ironed? So I can see why she thought she was within her rights to ask that. But see, I think the problem is that Sarah would have done this like one time. That would have just been sort of like, oh, that's a lot of work she's putting on the very limited staff at Highgrove. But this was the way she always approached staff. And I think that we need to bear that in mind. Sometimes I think Sarah was overly criticized for things that were rather minor. We'll have an example of that later. But her problem was that she would consistently do things that, though maybe small in the moment, were over time a measure of the way she thought people who served her ought to be treated. So like staying out all night and then showing up, in the middle of the night and saying to the staff, "I need a meal, prepare us a meal." It's like the dead of night. And these people have been working since 6:30 in the morning. That kind of behavior towards the staff, like, "I'm not going to think of you as a human. You're a machine that will get the tasks done that I need. I'm not going to think of you, Wendy Barry, as a housekeeper who has 1,000 things to do and doesn't really have the time to iron my entire wardrobe. I'm just going to throw this at you and you'll have to figure out how to complete the demand I just made." That's the problem with Sarah Ferguson. Not that she asked for this woman to iron clothing. The woman had said, "You need anything ironed." But it's because she would give more work than the woman could complete when you considered she had all these other tasks to do. It's always that she didn't think. And that's Sarah's problem. She should have had a shirt that said, "I don't think, so be careful of me." She doesn't know how to consider what happens next. The idea that there's something around the corner does not even pass through her pretty little head. You're going to see that with the way she treats people, but also with the way she makes her choices and decisions. If I feel this certain way, I must do this certain thing. There's no, "Oh, I wonder what's going to happen if I do that." Sarah does not think. And she doesn't think about what will happen to her, and she also doesn't think about the consequences of the way she treats others. She doesn't think, "I can't give this woman my entire wardrobe to iron." Never does it enter her pretty little head. This woman's got other things to do. No. Well, she said, "Did I need anything ironed?" So I just gave her everything. Okay, let's go on to the fact that she's expecting. This section is entitled Baby Yorklet. And I'm just going to tell you this much right now. We are about to embark on a journey with Sarah where we learn that she got into the royal family because she thought it would make her rich. She's very much like Meghan Markle in that sense. And she is trying to monetize this name faster than you can say fast. The couple's first child, Beatrice, after Queen Victoria's youngest daughter, Andrew's preference had been for Annabelle, was induced on August 8th to fit Andrew's leave from Singapore. In a departure from custom, the baby was born at the private Portland hospital. A 21-gun salute and special newspaper editions marked the occasion. Yet the birth did not solve the problems in the marriage, which were stoked by further press disapproval after Sarah, suffering from postnatal depression, joined Andrew on a 10-day tour of Australia for the bicentennial celebrations the following month, leaving 10-week-old Beatrice with nanny Alison Wardley. As the Duchess admitted, "Most of all, I needed to shore up my marriage. The 2 years since our wedding had wafted us apart, though I wouldn't dare say as much. I sensed we were in trouble." Andrew appeared incapable of responding to her needs and changing moods, which were accentuated by appetite suppressants, or of giving her the necessary support against the criticisms of her weight, dress sense, and the number of holidays she took. She'd managed to add another with her sister and mother at the exclusive Madeira Island resort on the Great Barrier Reef, paid for by Australian Airways. She later told one of her confidants, "I'd write to him almost every day and eagerly await the post for his return letters, but they never came. I was missing him madly, and I couldn't understand why he couldn't spare the time to let me know what he was up to. I was interested to know how he was getting on, and for him to write back and say how much he was missing me. But he never did. It was so depressing." In an effort to solve her problems, the Duchess often sought advice from psychic healers. She'd long done this. Now it was Madame Basso's turn. In mid-February, accompanied by 2 detectives, Sarah paid a visit to the self-proclaimed healer, sitting for 3 hours beneath a blue perspex pyramid and being transported back in time to the Pharaohs. Her police protection officers had advised the Duchess not to see the healer, who had appeared in court for assault, and to whose house police had been called 20 times to sort out disputes with the neighbors. But Fergie went ahead. Basso began increasingly to be summoned, once finding the couple in the middle of a heated discussion, with Andrew pressing his wife if there was anything else she'd kept from him, and Sarah assuring him that he knew all there was to know. See, and this is just really indicative of where they're at. Here they are in a fight about some level of indiscretion that has happened. And Sarah decides, I'm not going to call in a licensed professional. I'm going to call in my psychic healer. And she'll help me sort out my horrific and crumbling relationship to my non-existent husband who's constantly away. And when he is back, we're fighting because both of us are in the middle of affairs. Like, the psychic healer cannot help you here. But this just goes right along with all the other poor decisions that Sarah was up to. Because Sarah next is going to call up Hello Magazine. See, Sarah's reviewed her finances and she just doesn't have enough money for a couple of the pet projects she needs to get completed. So she calls up Hello Magazine and says, hey, I'll give you a ton of pictures, lots of inside look at me, my family, our house, my home, and then maybe you can give me a hefty sum. And they agree to this, to the tune of £250,000. Now, of course, Sarah's going to tell everybody that this money is going to go to charity, but let's read and find out what sort of charities she likes to donate her money to. Media censure continued after Hello Magazine paid $250,000 for a 48-page spread with 70 pictures of the Yorks' domestic life, including photos of Beatrice in the bath. Earning money personally from exploiting a royal position was something new for working royals and deeply frowned on. It was a canny investment for the magazine, which added 150,000 fresh sales to its 300,000 copy circulation, claiming no money had been paid to the couple. Instead, a donation had been made to a charity of their choice. The charity turned out to be Susan Barante's, who was in financial difficulties, and also the need to pay for extra features at Sunninghill, which the Queen was no longer prepared to pay for. As the Duchess noted, the pool and tennis court were yet to be built. Luxuries, granted, but a big house must have its finishing touches if it's not to look half-baked. By the time the last worker left, I would draw more than $500,000 out of my own account to finish Sunninghill. So as you can see, it was very difficult for me. $500,000 had to go into that tennis court and swimming pool. And, of course, I can't just have a half-baked house. I can't have some sort of structure that doesn't look finished. What about the pool and the tennis courts? Luxuries, yes, but definitely needed. And I had to pay for them. Imagine that. Yeah, she paid for them with the money from Hello Magazine, who paid her £250,000. What is this? How could you tell everybody the money's going to charity? The charity of what? Your swimming pool fund? I didn't realize that was a recognized charity. And it's things like this that it's like, I was just so put upon. Everyone hated me so. Well, why do you think so? You just sold pictures of your daughter in a bathtub to a magazine, then turned around and used that money for quote-unquote charity. But what you really were doing was funding your mom's polo pony obsession and the fact that you want a tennis court and a swimming pool. Right, that's not a charity. But Fergie decided to feel better about the whole situation because when a documentary was made about the Queen and the Queen was shown with her family, nobody seemed to bat an eyelash at that. So she felt like everybody was just making a great big hubbub because they didn't like her. The book goes on to say that it was rumored the Queen was not happy about her granddaughter being exploited in this way. But a documentary, Elizabeth R., made in 1992, filmed shortly afterwards, included the family joking about, and the Queen taking Beatrice on a pony ride at Balmoral. As Sarah Riley noted, a little daylight was not so terrible, it turned out, when the Queen was adjusting the blinds. In December 1988, fashion commentator Richard Blackwell named the Duchess as #1 on his list of worst-dressed women, describing her very colorfully, as a fashion obscenity who walks like a duck with a bad leg. Adding, she looks as if she makes beds in Ireland or milks cows. Scathing. A duck with a bad leg, though, that's a mental picture, isn't it? The following January, a tabloid poll rated Sarah, christened Duchess Doolittle after 2 separate skiing holidays that month, as doing the most damage to the reputation of the royal family, followed by Prince Andrew. Earlier that month, she'd been criticized for turning up at the service for the Clapham rail disaster, in which 34 people had been killed, in her soft-top Jaguar XJS. In February, she agreed a £126 fee for an exclusive interview with the Daily Express, which appeared on the same day that she announced she was pregnant with her second child. In fact, she'd failed to tell the paper, with the result that it would only pay her half her fee. It all added to a growing distrust between the media and the Yorks, and the shaping of a narrative of them as rogue royals. They had become fair game. Okay, before we continue on with the story, I just want to say a little side note, I'll be quick. This business about constantly criticizing them has come for sure at the cost of their poor behavior. Absolutely, they're making bad decisions. What is this business about getting a magazine to pay you $250,000 for some inside pictures because you don't feel like you have enough? Okay, because the rest of the chapter, we're going to be giving lots of solid numbers on the way that Sarah was spending family money, okay? But she just doesn't think she has enough. All right, she spends like there is no tomorrow. And so, of course, there's plenty for us to criticize here. But, and I've said this many times with Harry, and I've said this with Meghan, these people are easy to criticize, but it doesn't mean that everything they do is irredeemable. And when you have to start reading into things to be angry and indignant, you have the problem. Because her showing up in a sports car to a memorial service is not a thing to get angry about. That's the car she drives. She used to have a BMW. They switched it out with a Jaguar because that's the British-made car, and that's the car she drives. You don't need to get your knickers in a bunch because she happens to have a nice sporty little car. Was she supposed to rent some kind of somber black vehicle so that she could quietly roll into the place and just, do the thing? If she decides to arrive in a sporty little car, that's the car she drives. And if you're going to spend emotional resources, time and ink written all about, because what she showed up in, can you believe it? Can you imagine it? You need to find something else to do. There's plenty we can report on that she's up to that's junk behavior. But her car is not part of the reason for you to be mad. If you want to talk about things to be mad about, let's talk about when she wrote a couple of kids' books that she clearly had plagiarized and that weren't very good books at all, but that she tried to claim had put her on the top of all of these elite lists. And it's like, if you were on top of any kind of bestseller list, it's because you had all the promotion and because of your name, not because you're some amazing children's book writer. Okay. This next section says that Sarah's experience learning to fly had inspired 2 32-page children's books, Budgie the Little Helicopter and Budgie at Bendix Point, based on the adventures of a helicopter called Budgie and his friend Pippa, a Piper Warrior plane, and Lionel, a Lynx helicopter. The $85,000 deal was announced by Simon & Schuster in July 1989, and the books were published 2 months later, supposedly selling over 100,000 copies off the back of widespread publicity. But it was not an easy experience. According to someone in publishing, the Duchess had to be handled with kid gloves all the time, while the palace press office interfered constantly. Everything had to be checked with them. Any change in the text, any bit of publicity we wanted her to do, everything. And the reviewers were not kind, with one newspaper writing, "Fergie never misses a cliché. Characters are pure stereotype." Anne Sonrethel, librarian at the Young Book Trust, which administered the then biggest prize in children's literature, the Smarties Award, was quoted saying, "I don't think Budgie stands anywhere in the field of children's literature. I imagine if they weren't written by her, none of the titles would have been published." Parallels were drawn with a very similar book, Hector the Helicopter, by Arthur W. Baldwin, published in 1964, as both central characters turn from shy helicopters stuck in hangars into heroes when they conduct a daring sea rescue. That's a real specific storyline, isn't it? Like, any little helicopter can do any little good deed, but that it would both be a sea rescue. Shy little helicopters that don't know which way to turn, but then suddenly they go out to sea, and after the daring rescue, they're heroes amongst their peers. Please, that is like 110% plagiarized. The Duchess's publisher, John Sargent, claimed it was 100% coincidence. Baldwin's publishers, Random House, considered taking legal action. The palace, embarrassed by the furor, forbade the Duchess from promoting the books in the United States, with the Queen's press secretary, Robin Janvrin, telling Sargent the Duchess of York was the greatest single threat to the monarchy in the current era, and his job was to control that threat. Sargent reminded him she was contractually bound to do so. The publisher found the whole experience stressful. At one point, she told me about her money woes, he said, and she asked if we could pay her more up front. This is just humiliating behavior from somebody who's a royal, somebody who has so many privileges in life that she's always walking up, I need more money, I need more money, anybody got more money? I need more, can I have a little up front? Like, please, stop. When she did travel to New York, staying at the Plaza Athénée, having insisted on a top hotel, she was late for a Today Show filming because she was having trouble deciding what shoes to wear. At the end of the trip, Sargent was presented with her hotel bill. The room service charge was 4 times the lodging, he recalled. She had entertained some friends. To add to the controversy, Sarah had claimed the proceeds were going to charity. Oh, not this again. Notably in an interview with Sue Lawley's BBC One program Saturday Matters. But it emerged that in fact only 10% would make it to the charity. Reputedly, the Duke's private secretary, Lieutenant Colonel Sean O'Dwyer, asked to be transferred to work for Prince Edward, appalled that a member of the royal family should be cashing in on their position for personal gain. I'm shocked. I'm truly shocked at how blatant it is. And this is really why I think they came down so hard on Harry and Meghan. When the royal family saw Harry and Meghan just chomping at the bit, ready to use that royal name to pad their pockets, they knew exactly what they were dealing with. They'd already done this with Sarah Ferguson. But I hadn't realized how early on in her relationship, for some reason I was under the impression that she had waited to use her title until she was kind of off and away from Andrew, and she was floundering around trying to figure out how she was going to pay her debts and pay her bills and make sure her children were able to live the lifestyle of their peers. I was under the impression that all of this foolishness had been something that she'd done afterwards in a desperate plight to stay afloat. I did not realize that just practically minutes after the wedding, she's already selling the family name, selling books. Selling books is crazy. But then selling her interviews and selling pictures of the family, all these side deals where she personally is benefiting, and then having the audacity to be like, it's going to charity. What charity? Your mom's polo ponies? What charity? It's going to charity. 10%. What? And exactly to what charity did the 10% make it to? You know what I'm saying? Was that part of her shoe money? Was that part of her purse money? What 10% charity? Because we know how she defines charity, and it ain't the way you and I define charity. Let's talk about Andrew for a minute. He's not as interesting, I thought, but then I started reading this part and I was like, mind blown. In September 1989, Andrew had returned to Portland as flight commander and pilot on HMS Campbelltown. There had long been stories that he was not only being granted special privileges, but demanding them. A naval colleague, Gary Clark, felt, there's no doubt that Andrew received favoritism. He never mixed with the likes of us. Basically, he could do what he liked. Clark also claimed the Duke had never once done night watch and had a steward to clean his cabin. No one else of his rank had that. One former colleague felt that though Andrew was capable of being pleasant and good company, he was also petulant, entitled, and extremely arrogant. The Duke was quite certain that he was the most important person on the ship and enjoyed throwing his weight around. He had a habit of barging into the ship's bridge without asking permission, which clearly offended naval etiquette. On one occasion, he came to the bridge to berate the officer of the watch about some orders he'd been given while flying, without noticing that the captain who was responsible for the orders, and was an actual 4-ring captain, was sitting at the back of the bridge. This then developed into a minor altercation between them, and A was ordered off the bridge. More embarrassingly, it was claimed by a senior officer that though Andrew's performance in his annual appraisals was below average, he was given glowing reports. In September 1990, he had been given the lowest mark for intelligence, 6 out of 10, though this was later raised to 7. Eventually, he was awarded a total score of 74 out of 100 based on his flying skills and enthusiasm, more than the highest achieved by much more talented officers under exceptional circumstances. Since 1989, Tony Hogg had acted as his naval appointer, or career manager, working closely with the Duke's private secretary, most notably another naval aviator, Captain Neil Blair, to shape the young man's career. Hogg's first impressions were of an immature, privileged, entitled, unreliable young man who played fast and loose with his private life and was not always honest. Andrew seemed to be a playboy trying to find himself, and an average pilot. He was only interested in the Navy on his own terms, without really understanding or accepting the level of commitment needed to make a successful career. Hogg soon, however, became more sympathetic as he got to know the prince. Although Andrew could be opaque, he felt a sense of compassion for him, detecting his loneliness and insecurity. He was drawn to the wrong sort of friends and had been badly supported by the system around him. He was also the product of a complex parental environment. At the same time, the naval appointer needed to set some boundaries. Hogg put it to his charge, "Do you want to be a naval officer or a golfer?" Andrew replied the former. Seeing that the Duke clearly needed support in order to make a success of his professional life, Hogg agreed a 3-way contract between himself, Andrew, and his private secretary, that the Duke would devote 80% of his working days to his naval career, and so the shaping of his professional life began to unfold. In the summer of 1990, the first Sea Lord, Julian Oswald, invited the Yorks, Hogg and his wife, and Andrew's self-appointed mentor, Roy McLean, and his wife, to lunch at his flat in Admiralty Arch to discuss Andrew's future in the Navy. Oswald asked what had been planned. Hogg replied that he thought Andrew would benefit greatly from a year at the Army Staff College. The Duchess's response was immediate. "Which one?" On being told Camberley, near their home in Ascot, she exclaimed, "Oh no, he's going to be at home," and promptly put her napkin over her head. The childishness of that, the foolishness of that response, it's just like, Sarah, if you're going to decide to be the clown, you got to be funny, okay? You can't just be a goof off. Playing the old trope, "Oh no, not my husband, he's going to be around all the day getting under my feet. Oh gosh, what am I going to do with him just lying about the house? He's going to be home all the time." It's just like this old worn out trope. Come on, you got to do better than that. And you're at a nice dinner, okay? You can't just make some loud exclamation, throw your napkin over your head, "Oh no, he's going to be home," towel over your head. It's just like, pull it together, lady. I know that one guy that she dated called her the Land Rover Rolls Royce of women. You could take her anywhere. But where was he going that he got the impression she could go anywhere? Because when she joined the royal family, they seemed to feel differently. All right, but see, now we're coming to a part that really blew my socks off, okay? It shouldn't have, but it did. This, to me, is the most egregious story we've heard about Andrew, by far, and I have to tell you, this is despicable. Now, I'm sure that we're going to go on to some other things that are probably going to shock me worse. But to this point, I know everyone's been like, he's entitled. He thinks he doesn't have to do any work. He thinks he's too good for everything. Yeah. But these have all been words. And we have gotten honestly precious few stories that explain to us how he thought he was better than everyone else. Well, this is a perfect example of how he thought the rules just did not apply to him. Andrew would eventually join the course in 1992, part of which required submission of a major paper involving original thought and extensive research. 3 days before this was due to be handed in, his private secretary, Neil Blair, made contact with another naval officer, a high-flying Oxford graduate, explaining that Andrew had not produced the paper, and asking if he would be prepared to help. The officer duly wrote the paper that helped the prince to pass the course. Yuck behavior. That is so lazy and lame. I can't even stand it. The fact that he would not even make any concerted effort, okay? Nobody thought that he was some kind of Einstein. No one thought he was going to produce a paper that was so blindingly original that everyone was going to be just laid out in amazement at what Prince Andrew had been able to accomplish. But to give no effort, to 3 days before the due date be like, well, Neil, I didn't do it. So you're going to have to figure out somebody who can do it for me because I didn't do it. I mean, I'm sure you can make some calls. I'm sure there's somebody out there. There are so many smart people around here. Just make some calls and somebody will get it done. It's like, it's not that big a deal. They're going to let me through anyway. But, I got to hand in something. I don't have anything and I'm not going to get anything done in 3 days. So you got that though, right, Neil? You'll figure it out, right? And then Neil did it. Well, Andrew's over there making himself just a laughingstock, just creating more and more instances for us to dislike him. Sarah's on a tear of her own, okay? Not to be outdone by Andrew, she needs to go and make an ass out of herself. This section is entitled Steve Wyatt, and Steve Wyatt is going to be the man who gets into the relationship and tears it apart, but I'm going to tell you right now, Sarah had no intentions of being a faithful wife. Like, I don't even think that was on her list of things to do when she said I do. I mean, I do believe that I will cheat on you if I find something better. I do believe I'm going to spend the family's money like there's no tomorrow. I do believe that I'm in this relationship because I want fame and fortune. I do believe that you are an annoying person and I'm not going to bother my little pretty head to be faithful to you. Those were her I do's, okay? Continuing. The Yorks' relationship deteriorated even as they found out Sarah was expecting their second child. By the way, having kids to these people is like not a worthy event. I'm just telling you, these people were like having sex and then she got pregnant and then it was like, okay. But their response to children is so trashy, it's crazy. They have the babies and leave the babies to the care of nannies. Sarah's inability to care for these kids is crazy. I mean, she has these kids and then like she's off to go be with her lover, leaving the newborn in the care of the nanny. Like, just gird your loins, you guys, because if we have to try to be positive about this person, because every story I've gotten so far, I am struggling to see her in any positive light. And I want to be positive, but I'm just telling you right now, we're going to be struggling. Upset by Andrew's bullying and his recent close relationship with a married woman, Sarah was receptive to falling in love. The moment would come on an official visit to America in November 1989 at the British Festival in Houston, where she was introduced to the socialite Lynn Wyatt. Her husband, the oil magnate Oscar Wyatt Jr., was known as the King of Crude, and her son, Steve Wyatt. Wyatt's real father, Robert Littman, had been sentenced to 6 years in jail in 1968 for murdering an 18-year-old French student while on an LSD trip. He thought she was a fire-breathing monster, and then disappeared. Sarah, bored and lonely, was instantly attracted to Wyatt, then in his late 30s, with his thatch of brown hair, soft blue eyes, and rich hypnotic voice, and shared interest in alternative medicine. One who was present remembered it was obvious that Sarah was enormously attracted to him. There was clearly a chemistry between them. The next day, she flew the 200 miles to the Wyatt 16,000-acre ranch near the Rio Grande, taking the controls of the helicopter for part of the journey. "Did your husband teach you to fly?" Wyatt asked. "He's too busy these days to teach me anything," she supposedly replied. The Duchess contacted her friend, the clairvoyant, Maureen Conway, who lived in Dallas, and asked for advice. Conway warned against the relationship, but knew she'd be ignored. I think that was the moment I first realized how little control she has over her impulses, her blind instincts. Whatever it is that makes her behave the way she behaves, she holds nothing back. The Duchess returned to New York via one of the Wyatt's private jets to continue promoting her Budgie books. On the way back to the United Kingdom, she shocked airline baggage handlers with a number of bags which she described as Christmas presents. The 51 pieces of excessive baggage contained around 33,000 pounds of newly bought clothes and gifts, including 6 pairs of shoes at 562 pounds each, handbags costing 3,125 pounds, 6 Italian sweaters at 625 pounds each, and a 515-pound teddy bear. "Not even Joan Collins has this much," one complained. By the way, side note again, sorry, I'm just finding it hard. Who spends 515 pounds on a teddy bear? Why are we buying teddy bears? And more to come on that subject in this chapter, the obsession with the teddy bears. Why did she want teddy bears on her wedding gown? Why did they travel in a carriage with a giant teddy bear on their wedding day? Why is she spending £500 on a stuffed teddy bear? What is the obsession with the stuffed animals? The press dubbed the Duchess her royal excess amid concerns that she and her husband now required 13 policemen to provide protection at a cost of over $1 million a year. That month, she agreed to start the second leg of the Whitbread Round the World yacht race in Montevideo in exchange for 11 first-class tickets, worth £38,000, from the race's sponsor. She used them to visit her mother and Hector, who were building a polo resort in Argentina. In December, Wyatt called to say he had been invited for a pheasant shoot at Constable Burton Hall in Yorkshire. By chance, Sarah was attending a gala charity performance at the Grand Theatre in Leeds as patron of Opera North on the same day, and her return flight on the royal flight was cancelled due to fog. Refusing an offer of overnight accommodation in Leeds, she arranged to drive the 50 miles to the 16th Century House to see Wyatt. The Duchess then drove to London for a lunch appointment, returning on the Queen's flight to spend a second night at Constable Burton Hall. The relationship that would eventually lead to her divorce had begun. On March 23, 1998, the couple's second child, Eugenie Victoria Helena, Andrew would have preferred Victoria Eugenie, was born by cesarean section. The Duke had driven himself from Devonport to be present for the birth, but the baby did little to save the marriage. Probably because she was in the middle of having an affair while she was pregnant. According to our friend, it was the moment the sexual side of their marriage ended. Their mutual attraction had always been physical, and without it the relationship crumbled. Sarah's a sensual woman who needs to be loved and likes to show affection. By now she was deeply involved with Wyatt, who provided the emotional security she'd been missing. Within 6 weeks of the birth, and having left behind her newborn daughter, Sarah, Beatrice and nanny Alison Wardley, a friend of Wyatt's, Priscilla Phillips, an actress and later wife of Roger Waters of Pink Floyd, and 2 police protection officers were enjoying a 5-day holiday at a luxurious resort of 30 cottages with views of the Atlas Mountains in Morocco, having flown there on Oscar Wyatt's private jet. In July, the Duchess joined Wyatt in the south of France, where his mother had rented Somerset Maugham's old villa for her 60th birthday party. Meanwhile, Andrew had been left at Castlewood to stand in for her at a charity event, the launch of a car rally to Monte Carlo in aid of the Chemical Dependency Center. Wyatt had extensive commercial interests in the Middle East, and he quickly began to seek Sarah's help. His stepfather was a heavy purchaser of Iraqi crude oil, and at the time negotiating for Iraqi investment in his own U.S.-based refineries. To help Wyatt, and to the consternation of the Queen's private secretary, Robert Fellows, Sarah hosted a dinner at Buckingham Palace in August 1990, the month Iraq invaded Kuwait, for Dr. Ramzi Salman, head of Iraqi State Oil Marketing Organization and one of Saddam Hussein's closest confidants. Afterwards, she dragged Salman and Wyatt, uninvited, to a dinner party hosted by Lord McAlpine. As Sarah was about to be seated beside McAlpine, Wyatt was motioned to another table, but he grabbed his lover by the hand and pulled her into his lap, insisting, "My woman and I sit together." He and his woman then treated the assembled company to what one described subsequently as a display of mutual fondling I have never seen before in a 3-star restaurant. Can I just pause to say that while I think it's abhorrent that 2 people would carry on a relationship when they are already married, people have affairs all the time, and it is 110% wrong, but it does sadly happen every hour on the hour. People are cheating on each other. However, may I just say, it's another level of depravity to be cheating with a woman who is pregnant with her husband's baby. How can you even be intimate when she is clearly with child and that child is not yours? Like, doesn't that kind of just put a chill on the vibe? It just seems like it'd be real hard to feel like you could ignore all the moral signals that this was incorrect when she comes in a room stomach first. Do you know what I'm saying to you? And I also think that it's interesting that she leaves the newborn at home when she wants to go party with her lover. But it isn't as though she's trying to scrub from his memory that she has a husband and she is a mother of that man's children, because she brought along Beatrice, the other kid. Somebody explain to me what is happening in these people's minds. Like, this is another level of, like, emotional, mental, and moral gymnastics in a league that I could never participate in. I'm not saying there aren't times in my life when I haven't looked back and thought, wow, Cheer, you really were functioning at the lowest level that you're possible to function at. But it just seems to me that when you are giving birth to a man's children, it just would impede your ability to cheat so easily on him. But also, to Steve Wyatt, how are you intimate with another man's wife when she has his child in her? Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, that seems like a whole nother level of mentally, morally checked out. To continue, let's talk about Sunning Hill. You'll recall that Sunning Hill is the home that they've been building for 4 years, okay? And this is the house that was being built on a plot of land that the Queen had given them. Now, this plot of land had originally had a house on it. In fact, it was the house the Queen herself had been given right after her wedding in 1947, but the house had burned down. So a new house is going to be built on it. It was going to be given to Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson. And this is the house that, in all of its regal wonder and beauty, just wasn't enough because the Queen had not set aside funds to make sure they had a pool and tennis courts. And that is why Sarah Ferguson had made a deal with Hello Magazine that she would sell them all kinds of pictures and give interviews and exclusive tidbits so that they might hand over $250,000 and she could put that into the charity known as Sunning Hill, her home, where there was no pool. Okay, but let's hear how that's going. Let's hear about what that house turned out to be like, okay? The book goes on to say that earlier that year in February, Hector Barantes had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, so Sarah had flown against advice of her doctors to visit him in hospital in New York, returning in July to see him with her daughters. 24 hours after she had said her goodbyes, he died, aged 51. In October, a memorial service was held. Then it was followed by a black-tied jungle-themed party with stuffed tigers peering out of the bushes and life-size gorillas and fairy-lit trees to mark the completion of Sunning Hill Park in what came to be called the bun fight at the Yorkie Corral. Guests included Steve Wyatt and his closest friend, John Bryan. After a 3-course meal for 100, another 200 guests joined the Yorks for a champagne party, served by waitresses in scanty, fake leopard skin outfits, and an Elton John cabaret. Can we just take a moment to talk about how trashy this is? First of all, why do we have stuffed animals peering at me from the bushes? And why are there pretend gorillas hanging from the trees? Who comes up with these themes? Why is her taste so poor? It isn't as though she hadn't been with the elites her whole life. It isn't as though there was nobody there to sort of shape what would be an appropriate, mature sense of taste. This is the person who wanted teddy bears and helicopters embroidered on her wedding gown. This is a person who rides around in carriages with giant teddy bears and who brings them home in her luggage at 515 pounds a pop. And now she wants to stuff the animals into the woods to look at her while she has a party right after the memorial service of her beloved stepfather. I don't understand this, but you know what? The stuffed animals in the bushes and hanging from the trees are just the beginning of the way that these people love the stuffed animals hanging around as decor. Sunning Hill had taken 4 years to build and been a huge expense, but the Yorks now had the home of their dreams, even if their taste was shared by few, and the house quickly collected a series of nicknames. South York, after South Fork, the Texas oil tycoon's estate, in the 1980 soap opera Dallas. Dallas Palace, Tesco Towers, and Happy Eater Hall. There had also been controversy after it was revealed that Sunning Hill had been built in a conservation greenbelt zone, that the plans had been rejected by the county council, but then overruled by Bracknell Council, and several residents had been evicted from their homes on security grounds. It further emerged that the couple had tried to get the American farmhouse-style kitchen, which cost £40,000, and bathroom supplied for free. Surrounded by 8-foot walls, Sunning Hill had its own helicopter landing pad, 12 bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms, a cinema, pool room and swimming pool, and 20 rooms of staff quarters. One entered by the 35-foot-high stone floor hall, which rose to a glass dome and minstrel's gallery, through a lobby ordained with a medieval soldier's helmet from Windsor Castle and the head of a North American buffalo, a gift from a royal tour. The living room with its huge fireplace was decorated with Ferguson tartan drapes, peach-colored walls, a grand piano covered with silver-framed family photos, and sofas, scattered with embroidered cushions, bearing the entwined initials A and S. And, not to be left out, half a dozen giant stuffed teddy bears. Because that's what a living room needs. 6 giant stuffed teddy bears just hanging around to complete the vibe. I mean, what? Next door, the red and white dining room was furnished with 24 Chippendale chairs, 16 of them made to match the 8 originals, and a huge glittering chandelier which cost £12,000 and was where the couple regularly hosted weekend dinner parties, waited on by staff in white tie, with 4 or 5 courses served off A&S monogrammed plates. The Duchess's study, because she's got to have her own study, they can't have their rooms together. The Duchess's study was decorated in pink with a large fireplace and television. The Duke's study in deep red wall coverings, with dark oak shelving lined with fake books made out of wood, and served by another television. Down a corridor was what was described as Aladdin's cave, which one visitor thought looked like a miniature warehouse. It was piled from floor to ceiling with cardboard boxes and other shapes wrapped in cellophane stacked against the wall. The gifts from their trips, some of their 2,000 wedding presents, which had included 600 dinner plates in 8 different patterns, 24 antique silver serving dishes at £1,500 to £8,000 each, 36 silver and glass condiment sets, 1,000 crystal glasses, and some 300 vases costing up to £600 each. A curved staircase led to the 40-foot by 25-foot master bedroom with 4-poster bed and mint green floral canopy, on which were a further collection of antique teddy bears, and bay windows looking out over the back garden. It had one of the world's largest walk-in wardrobes, measuring 100 feet by 50 feet, built by Andrew's cousin, David Lindley. Next door was a bathroom, with a giant marble bathtub, which the builders had dubbed HMS Fergie. In one wing, the nursery with twin bedrooms, one with purple wallpaper, the other blue, a children's bathroom, and a playroom with a miniature table and chairs and small sofa. A spare room, decorated with ape-covered wallpaper, was called the monkey room, and the downstairs loo had a musical loo roll holder that supposedly played the Star-Spangled Banner or God Save the Queen. Guests reported that towels, flannels, hand soaps, and even loo paper had been embossed with the initials A and S. 12 phone lines had been installed, the walls fortified with blast-proof plaster, the bedrooms with panic buttons, and there was even a bomb shelter. The annual cost of guarding the house was estimated to be £300,000. 8 weeks after the Sunning Hill party, Steve Wyatt was one of 800 guests invited to the Dance of the Decades at Buckingham Palace to mark the Queen Mother's 90th birthday, Princess Margaret's 60th, Princess Anne's 40th, and Prince Andrew's 30th. The Queen asked whether Wyatt was quite the sort of person you should be encouraging, dear. Susan Barentes was more direct. Chill him. But Sarah continued the affair. That's where we have to leave off today. But let me just say that next time we get together, which will be on Monday, we're going to begin with the separation, which we can all see is the only likely consequence of this kind of behavior. Sarah's not endearing herself to the family. She's certainly not endearing herself to Andrew, and Andrew's off living his own life and doesn't really care what Sarah does. Of course his naval career is, it is important, it's his job, so I don't begrudge him not being home. That's what his job entails, but he's not making any effort to communicate with her. He's not making any effort to be loyal to her. He's off having his own affairs. She's off having her own affairs. This is not a couple who understood, I'm in this till death parts us, in sickness and health. They don't understand that. Those were words they said, not words they meant. And I'm not surprised. I do wonder if the separation that is going to befall these people is one of the first set of consequences Andrew's ever going to have to face. Because up until this point, all the decisions that he's made have never really had consequences. If he decides to enroll in a class and not do the work, he knows somebody will get it done. If he decides to have an affair and acts poorly and shamefully, he knows it will be covered up. And for Sarah's part, as soon as she entered the royal family, she really knew that she could act however she wanted because they employ a whole team of people to make sure nobody finds out what you really did because they don't need the blowback on the monarchy. But there's nothing you can do about the consequence of a marriage falling apart. No one can cover it up enough that the two of you are going to feel that you can manage to stay together happily and faithfully. And even those who have managed to stay together for public perception, there's not real happiness behind it. So these two are going to destroy the marriage that they had. And I really wonder I'm interested to see how Andrew deals with this because up until this point, he's never had to bear the responsibility for his choices. And this isn't something that all the fixers can fix. So I'm excited about next week. I'm looking forward to that episode. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're enjoying this and you have a friend who you think would enjoy this series, please send it to them. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for the Friday News Roundup. Bye.